So anyways, we just did the little warm-up to talk about kind of the intro to World War I. Today what we're going to be doing for the rest of the class is kind of talking about the fighting that's going to take place on the Western Front, primarily in the first 2 years of the war. And then what we're going to do is we're going to transition into primary source activity, talking about probably the biggest battle of World War I. And that's going to serve to kind of provide you with some information, not only about this specific battle and this specific fighting of front, but also to teach us about reliability of historical sources. So we'll get to that in a little bit. Anyways, before we get started, let's just start with a little intro, kind of remind ourselves where we've been, what's been going on thus far. If you remember, in August of 1914, war fever is hitting the Europeans. The Europeans have not been at a serious war in basically what's been 100 years. They're excited to go, and it's August 1914. They're loading the ships. Okay, bye. Okay, it's not going to work out too well for them, and we're going to see that as we go forward. The expectation is that this is going to be a very short war. August of 1914, the soldiers, whether they be British, whether they be German, etc., think they're going to be home by Christmas. The reality is this war will last over 4 years, into November of 1918. There are several fronts of World War I, and whenever we talk about fronts, we're just referring to where fighting is taking place. However, the biggest front that we need to be worried about is the Western Front. And the reality is the only reason, or one of the only reasons, there's fighting on the other fronts has to do with the fact that it's all about breaking the stalemate over here on the west. So we will be looking at that as we kind of move forward here and as we see kind of what's happening. Any questions about this thus far? Here's where we see the Western Front taking place. And again, where's the Western Front? Basically the border between France and Germany. Okay, here also is another look at some of the other places that war is going to be happening on. So here we see the East, which is going to be another front. Here we see some of the fighting that's going to take place in Italy, some of the fighting down here in the Ottoman Empire, etc. But the reality is, again, our big front of fighting is right here in the West. Okay, so if you Okay, so let's remind ourselves of what's going on here. If you remember, Germany has a plan in regards to preparing for war even before war starts, and that plan is known as the Schlieffen Plan. Now, if you're Germany, you need to remind yourself, you're surrounded on both sides. There's Russia on the east, and then on the west you have France. And so what needs to happen here is, if you're Germany, you need to avoid two-front war. Now let's kind of remind ourselves, or let's think logically, why is it so critical or so important to avoid something like a two-front war? Whether you're, in this case, Germany, but if you're any country fighting a war, why would it be so critical to try to avoid two-front war? Okay, right?
Because Germany is going to be forced to split their resources.
Okay, very good. Again, you're already going to have problems. Now you're going to have the problem here of having to split your resources. So in order to combat this, Germany's going to come up with this plan. This plan will be a complete failure. And again, there are several reasons why, but the reality is this will not work out well. First off, you can see on this map the way the plan is going to go. The idea here is you kind of wrap around France, if you're Germany, and then you shoot out into the Eastern Front. Well, the reality is that means passing through Belgium. Well, Belgium will be a little bit stronger than the Germans expected, and it'll actually take about 2 weeks in total to just get through Belgium alone, which was kind of the amount of time that this plan originally designed to move all the way through actual France. The other thing is that technically the decision here to invade Belgium is actually going to be what officially puts Britain into the war. Why is that the case? Well, technically there was an old treaty in 1839 signed that said that Britain would protect Belgium's neutrality by going through Belgium. Britain's now there. Now the reality is they were probably going to be there anyway due to their alliance with France, Russia, etc. Yeah?
Why was that treaty made in the first place?
Oh, it goes back to some of the activities that were going on in Europe in kind of the 1800s in order to kind of keep peace. Again, you got Belgium, this kind of smaller country here, right in the middle between some of the big powers, so trying to protect them, not invade them, take over. Very good. Another thing that's going to happen is, remember, this plan relies on the fact that Russia is going to take a very long time to mobilize. The reality is that's not true, and that's not actually going to be the case. And instead, Russia will mobilize within 2 weeks' time as well. So already, even before they've gone through Belgium, Germany now has to divert troops to the Eastern Front. And so we see a lot of issues and a lot of problems that are happening here as we move through this. As Germany kind of progresses through and gets closer and closer, what we also see is kind of a funny highlight of World War I, where reserve troops will be taxied in from France and British troops to help protect this. And that's where you see this Battle of the Marne right here. Now again, the Battle of the Marne is kind of funny because of the taxis bringing soldiers to the front lines, but more importantly, this Battle of the Marne kind of shows us this is going to be a long war. And also the fact that Germany is going to be forced to fight a two-front war. Again, the plan does come to a failure, and it does fail relatively quickly with all these other factors coming into play. But what does kind of need to be noted here is the fact that now Germany will be forced to fight on the two fronts. Questions on any of this? Okay, great. Let me show you some pictures. These are taxis coming in these are filled with troops. And again, if you want to talk about World War I being a modern war, probably our first modern one, taxis delivering soldiers has got to be part of that. Yeah?
Would we consider the use of taxis like a concept of total war?
Well, absolutely. Again, these are civilian taxis, so definitely that could be a component of the total war mentality. Literally, you're using all your resources to get there. Very good. Questions? Okay. Now, here's what we see as far as the first major fighting, and we can see going here. Germany does get somewhat close. I mean, here's Paris right here. This is about as much as they're going to advance kind of in on the dotted line is what you see here, which was actually about 50 miles outside of Paris. However, they're going to fight back right here, and that's going to be a little bit of a changer. All right, let's talk about the pace that war is going to take into the early years of 1914 and 1915. Now, this is what a lot of you guys identified in the warm-up and things as being what you remember about World War I, which is the trench aspect. And maybe you heard about that before, so let's talk about it a little bit. After the Battle of the Marne, both sides are going to start racing towards the sea. And we have this kind of element of World War I where we have the march to the sea as both sides are going. And basically what they're trying to do is be the first one to get there. As they are, they're trying to not only advance themselves, but to kind of outflank and stop the other side. So what's going to start to happen here is the soldiers are going to start to build these very elaborate trenches in order to kind of block the other side from advancing. And what's going to happen is because of that element, we're going to see trench warfare break out between the two sides. Now, someone tell me, what is a trench? What is a trench? Trenches exist today. What is a trench? Okay, a very deep hole. Okay, so that's exactly what's going to happen here. So basically, this is not going to be kind of the standard fighting where we're right up against one another. Instead, we're going to be basically hiding out in these big holes in the ground, waiting for action to kind of ensue. The reality is trench warfare is brutal. It is very, very challenging. It is very, very tough. The trenches become the soldiers' home. They also become where they die, where they go to the bathroom, etc. So they are riddled with diseases and other things. It's also something that kind of happens every once in a while. It starts to rain, and the rain starts to kind of creep up the trench. You're standing there at the trench, and all of a sudden you have what's called trench foot, this kind of awful disease in your foot, almost like a frostbite type thing from the rain coming in. So this is a brutal type of thing. Rats live in the trenches. Bad. Anyways, the other big thing is not only is trench warfare kind dismal as far as living conditions are concerned. The other problem with trench warfare is that it's going to lead to stalemate. Now, you've heard of this word before. What is the word stalemate kind of referred to? What are we talking about?
To be at a standstill.
To be at a standstill. Okay, more. Someone give me some added
Side is like going on the offensive, right? Like neither side's trying to fight or just chilling.
Okay, watch that, because they could still be fighting, but let's
There's
see.
just no actual progress being made.
No progress. So there could be some fighting going on. You're actually, though, right. It's going to be minimal, and there's going to be a lot of waiting around periods, but there's no real progress being made. Do any of you guys ever play this stupid game, Bloody Knuckles? Boom, 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 boom. So what happens at the end of this whole transpiring? Okay, no one's gone anywhere. However, if you play this game, what's going to happen to your knuckles? Okay, they're going to be bloody. Well, that's kind of a good way to think about World War I. A lot of this and a lot of blood, but for basically no progress. So anyway, something interesting to think about. This will be the pace of the war into 1914 and into 1915. At the end of 1915, we see a new technology. So again, going back to this idea of total war, new technology, with the German use of poison gas actually for the first time. Now, originally, poison gas would be somewhat effective, but then people figure out, hey, look, you can wear masks and, it's going to be okay. So it's not that big of a deal. Also kind of interesting, how does something like poison gas travel? Wind.
Oh,
Okay, so what might be something that's kind of happening here with the wind aspect? Okay, it's going to blow back, okay, and that's exactly what's going to happen. And some of our guys, they think, oh, we got this. Send the poison gas. Okay, so it's bad. Poison gas, by the way, we'll get into this when we get into the technologies of World War I. Awful. And the soldiers really feared it. The reality is, though, it's not actually that lethal. It just hurts a lot. I don't want to discredit it, I'm just saying. Questions? Okay. Now here's a look at our guys in the trenches, and again, I would suggest that this doesn't seem like a great place to be. It also looks, if anyone can see this, does anyone see something kind of interesting at the bottom of the picture?
is that in person?
Yeah, this looks like a dead body, or if he's asleep. I think he'll be out for a long time. Here, by the way, is what we do, and again, this is how we set this up, and we're ready for the attack. We'll see this as we get to the sources, but let me kind of explain the way this kind of looks into the trenches. What we do is, with this our battlefield and things like that, we're going to have the two sides, and maybe this is a little bit better graph to kind of put this into pictures. And what we have here is on this side, this is the defensive side, trenches and things like that. And in the middle, we have this area called no man's land. No man's land is the area between the trenches. Now, something's called no man's land. What might be the situation behind something being called no man's land? Okay, no man goes there because it probably means death, and that's exactly what's going to happen here. So anyways, here's the way this goes. We are, let's say this is the German side. So here's the German side. We're geared up, we're ready to go, and we're just waiting in the trenches. And this is where we live our life. We're just hanging out, and we're waiting. And then on the alternate side, we have the British. And the British, they're waiting too. Who's going to go first? Now here's the thing. In trench warfare, if the area between the trenches is called no man's land, what side do you want to be playing? Defense. Okay, so no one really wants to do it. However, sometimes you got to make the decision, okay, the time is up now. So here's how this will kind of work. So we're going to get into this battle in a second, but in the battle, we're done, we're the Germans. And we say, you know what? We've been in stalemate for a long time. Nothing's working out. It's time to go. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have this heavy artillery. It's going to start coming in. Boom, boom. And all of a sudden, that's kind of a signal, okay, we're about to jump out of the trenches, and we're about ready to go. This will go on for hours, just trying to break the defenses of some way, shape, or form. And again, it'll be somewhat effective, but not really, because the reality is we're waiting to go. We're all set up. After this, probably going all night, finally it's going to start slackening off. And that's kind of our signal, and that's kind of our sign. Okay, we're ready to go here. What that also means, though, is if you're the other side and you're the British, you're sitting here and you're saying, oh yeah, they're coming. So you're ready for them, etc. So finally, that heavy artillery is going to kind of slow down pretty much to a halt, and then all of a sudden, we're going to leap out of the trenches, and we're going to come in here, and we're going to be going, and we've got the guns, and stuff like that. Here's the problem. You're out on this field, basically, between the trenches. You are an open target. And so what happens here is you're just getting picked off. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, so then you're coming in here, and then so your job is to survive. And so you're sitting here, maybe doing some spin moves. And you're trying, but the reality is it's not easy. Because you get fired upon, maybe you hop on this place. Oh, okay. You see your friend, he's not doing too well. Okay. And all of a sudden you're trying to move yourself through, etc. What also makes this incredibly complicated is not only do you have these guys, as you saw in that picture earlier, right here with your regular kind of standard guns, what you also have is the machine gunners. So you're coming through, you're trying to do your thing, and you can see these machine gunners right here, possibly in some of these dig outs and stuff like that. And so all of a sudden, you're sitting there, and the machine gunner, brand new technology, very quick. So you're going to start away. It's not a good situation. Let's say you somehow manage to get through. Okay, there's another problem here, and you can see it right here. What is lining up in front of the trenches? The barbed wire. And so this is a really big problem. And again, if you imagine you're getting fired upon, you're trying to do all these moves, whatever, if you hit the barb, you're not looking for the barbed wire. And so somehow you get there, oh dang it. Trapped up in barbed wire. That's going to be about it. So again, kind of a little bit of I don't want to say funny, but it's kind of a one way to see it. But either way, what you're kind of seeing here is that this is brutal. And again, it's very frustrating because the reality is every time you try to go on the offensive and try to break the stalemate, it's probably not going to work out well for you. So this is a very different war than we've ever seen before. Questions? I think I need some water.
That was great. Thank you.
Hopefully now you remember the trenches. Question, guys.
How long did it take to dig the trenches?
Oh, relatively quickly, actually. Again, you get a big kind of group of soldiers together, dig it pretty well. But what that also means is because you dig it very quickly, do you think they're really structurally done well? No, not at all. And again, you're dealing with the elements. We live in Southern California. It's hot all the time. It barely ever rains. Like drizzles this morning, and everyone's like, oh, okay, this is France. Okay, it rains a decent amount, so you're dealing with this stuff, especially in the wintertime. Yeah, Kramer.
So when they're digging the trenches, is there no fighting going on?
No, because
aren't you gonna get shot?
I guess that's true. That's why you got to build them quickly. But also, if I'm digging the trenches right now, what do you think the other side is doing?
Digging the trenches.
Digging the trenches, exactly. Yeah, Julie. Oh yes.
So, what was the weaponry at the time? Because wouldn't he just get sniped? Like, he just died.
Oh yeah. Well, no, you don't have those type of things to fight yet. Too far away, basically, for that. Now, that's also another point. What you see here, focus please, is you see that these guys have kind of your rifles. They're a little bit stronger than they've been before. This guy, yeah, seems like a sitting duck. The reality is, the guns in World War I wouldn't be able to reach all the way across the trench to hit him, so he'll be okay. The other thing, though, that could possibly, and this is probably our biggest casualty toll in World War I, is going to be the heavy artillery, which are basically massive cannons that again, we set up with. So maybe they hit this guy or they hit some of this stuff. There's a possibility of that. But again, that's not very accurate or anything, so that's kind of a different mentality and kind of pushing themselves through. Good. Questions? And again, we're going to see the sources in a little bit, and when we see the sources, you're really going to get a first-hand account from these soldiers and from these people on exactly how this looks. Okay, by the way, what is this element in reference to? Poison gas. And that's what you see here, which is great. Now, there's something else which I like about this picture, which is what other new piece of technology is depicted in this picture? Okay, here's the machine gun. Again, the first time that we moved through. And again, when we go to the sources today, we're going to take some time to look at some of the new technology specifically. When we talk about how World War I was fought, we're also going to spend some more time talking about the technologies specifically. However, what you need to realize, World War I, a lot of new stuff coming into play. But what we'll kind of find out is for as impressive as a lot of these new technologies are, as in the first time we're going to see them, the reality is they're not going to really make much progress and much headway into this whole deal. All right, questions? Okay, now let's move on into the Battle of Verdun, and let's talk about what happens and what goes on here. So anyways, the Battle of Verdun takes place in 1916, and this is the first major attempt to break the stalemate.